Okay. Okay. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Peter Blašković. I'm the CEO of Slovak Innovation Energy Agency, and I would like to say some few words at the beginning. Then I will pass the word to the moderator, Mr. Smatana. At the beginning, I would like to say this is our last meeting under our chairmanship, which was we've been very proud to be leading the chairmanship of Taftie, basically the last year or this year, last year. However, because of the current epidemiological situation, we will be not able to meet and together in person with almost all of these events or either the meetings, unfortunately online. However, technology shows and is a part of the innovation which our agencies, all our agencies in the network of Taftie are representing the innovations, are showing that the innovations even in the COVID, thanks to the innovation in the COVID time, we can all still continue our work and continue our missions. Today's agenda or today's point is basically the policy, European policies, or Taftie policies, or European policies related to the resilience of European Union and the whole, basically all the countries, all the member countries, maybe we're saying even the worldwide. However, what is important from the point of view of us as innovators or representing the innovation agencies is the best way to resilience to any economical and social threats which are basically, or now currently health threats which are facing the world, which the European Union is facing and will be facing in the future. Because of course we all know, I mean, in some previous discussions, if I may say a few words again more, in some previous discussions, I got a question if we expected, if we've been prepared for this kind of situation, which is a corona. I said, most probably we should expect something like this because it happened before, and we are sure it will. And now, unfortunately, maybe not so positive, but it will happen again. And this is how is the life, and we shall be then just be better prepared for the resilience towards these things. And I believe that the innovations are the only way, or one of the most efficient ways, how to improve our resiliency and to better react on all of these challenges which we are facing and which we will be facing in the future. And we have to look at openly to this because the challenges will definitely come. So this will be all from my side. Thank you very much. I wish you a very fruitful discussion, and I hope that I saw the presentations are very good. So, Martin, I pass to you.
Thank you very much. And I don't want to keep you waiting because the presentation is very, very interesting, and I would like to thank and give my thanks to our esteemed speaker, Mr. Alexandr Hobza, who is head of Research, Innovation, Strategy and Foresight Service Unit at DG Research and Innovation. And before I pass the word to Mr. Hobza, just a few words for those who do not know Mr. Hobza. Prior to his current placement at EU Commission, he worked as a research fellow at the Center of EU Policy Studies in Brussels. He has a PhD from University of Economics in Prague and master's degree in quantitative economics from University in Brussels. His research interests are basically all about macroeconomic imbalances, international financial flows, political economy and structural reforms, and that's why he is one of the most suited and experienced persons who can actually explain the current situation, and that is the reason why his presentation is actually focused on how COVID has shaped and will shape research and innovation landscape in the EU. Mr. Hobza, floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for the very kind introduction. And basically, what I would like to focus on in my presentation is to discuss how innovation, and this squares perfectly well with what has already been said, said, can help to pave our way out of the COVID-19 crisis, but also prepare us for future crises, which definitely will come. If I can ask for another slide. So in my presentation, I will first look at the situation caused by COVID-19 and then how innovation can, what role it can play. Then I'll try to focus a little bit more towards future and look at broader challenges that the EU is facing, some of them which we know and some of them which we do not know yet, but which are certain to arrive. And I will conclude by elaborating a little bit on the EU policies which relate to innovation efforts. And just to give you a little bit of a spoiler, and then I will finish with a short reflection on the zoology of crisis. So if I can ask for the next slide. So to provide a bit of a framework for my talk, I mean, here you can see how research and innovation can be crucial in addressing key challenges which are facing Europe. In the short run, I mean, now all our attention is focused on COVID-19, which struck us some 2 years ago, and which still is determining, you know, the pace of our lives, both in private but also professional, having huge impact in terms of health, but also in terms of economy. And on all of these aspects, I will argue innovation can be very crucial, and we have already seen it in a number of areas and aspects. However, COVID didn't, you know, and not everything started with COVID, but already before COVID, there were very important challenges which were facing Europe. You know, one of them clearly climate change. Now ongoing COP26 discussions on how to counteract the constant increases in temperatures, but also population aging, which concerns well, virtually all European countries, but many other world countries as well, and also growing social inequalities and regional inequalities, I should say, which are also shaping the way how our societies are working, how our political systems are operating, and have very profound and may have even bigger effects in the longer run. Also, in this case, research and innovation can have important role in addressing at least partially these big challenges. Next slide, please. So on COVID-19. There has been, well, it was a surprise, probably if it shouldn't have been, as I will also discuss towards the end of my presentation, but public authorities, national authorities, but also the EU have stepped in rather quickly and try to provide solutions to this huge crisis. In terms of R&I, this happened through direct support to R&I projects. I mean, one can think of vaccines, one can think of testing, diagnosis, you know, but many other elements. We also try to speed up the R&I processes by optimizing framework conditions. Also try to help by improving or speeding up the translation of research findings into public health policy. This was also a crucial element. Cooperation and coordination, both at European but also international level, was absolutely crucial given the nature of the crisis. And clearly, monitoring, analyzing, you know, how the COVID epidemics has been evolving, but also about its impacts, also was very important element. And clearly, communicating and then reaching out to stakeholders. You know, these were all elements that through different policies at the EU and also national level, we have tried to use the role of R&I and address the challenges that we were facing. But and next slide, please. Not everything has been related to the health dimension of the crisis, clearly. I mean, by stopping big parts of the economy for quite an extended time, the COVID has had huge implications also on how the economy has been working. You know, companies, both small and large, were very significantly affected, and there has already been an important impact, but we can also predict that this will carry over into the future to a large extent. I mean, in this graph, you can see the impact of COVID on registrations of businesses and also declaration of bankruptcies. And essentially, in particular, in the second quarter of 2020, when the initial wave of COVID struck, you can see a huge decline in both. I mean, obviously, in terms of creation of new businesses, this is very bad news. In terms of bankruptcies, it's a slightly more complicated story. I mean, realizing the huge impact on companies, public authorities have stepped in with a number of measures, and these measures have been rather successful in preventing a huge wave of bankruptcies, which is a good thing on the one hand. On the other hand, there is probably by now a number of companies which would have gone bankrupt under normal circumstances, which are still around there, which have somehow clinched on the support lines that were provided by governments, which means that in the future, and then from the red line you can see that it did not go up to the level which was experienced before the crisis, that we may expect some unpleasant surprises on that side. So problems are accumulated in the business sector, and may materialize in the coming period. Now, in terms of business registrations, I mean, the huge decline in registrations is certainly not good news, because, as we know, the inflow of new, highly motivated, innovative companies is something which very importantly contributes to all innovation efforts. So some people and analysts even speak about lost generation of startups, not only in Europe, in the world as a whole, but Europe was very strongly affected by this. So when we put these two effects together, we see quite important challenges which are facing us for the future. Now, and next slide, please. This also materializes into very direct impacts on R&D or R&I efforts. So in this graph, I'm showing you the results of the 2021 EU R&D investment scoreboard, which still remains to be published. So these are results based on the first sample, but the final sample, which you will be able to check soon, will provide qualitatively very similar results. So what we can see from this scoreboard is that there has been important impact on R&I by companies. Again, we can see that smaller companies have been affected more than bigger companies, and also we can see that there has been very differentiated effect across sectors. So some sectors like aerospace and defense or automobiles have been affected very strongly, and R&I efforts measured by R&I for R&D spending has declined. On the other hand, there were sectors which actually increased R&I spending, and this concerns health industries, ICT producers, or ICT services. And this is not surprising given the nature of the crisis and, well, the health nature of the crisis, but also the very important role which ICT have played in dampening the impact by going online and going more into teleworking modes. We do not organize conferences in person anymore, but also like now we're speaking online. So all this required more R&I efforts, which is positive, and then that's why we saw some improvements. Now, these effects then basically translate into overall R&D spending, and given the different shares of different sectors in different economies, what we can see is that altogether, actually, private or corporate R&D spending has declined. And that's precisely because the share of aerospace and defense, and then also automobiles, is much larger than for example, than US or China or some other main competitors. US, on the other hand, with higher share of health industries and ICT industries, has increased its private R&D spending. So there is an important compositional component. Now we will see how all this evolves in the future, because this was driven by the first impact of the crisis, and then for the future, probably automobile sector will again start investing more, at the very least, in order to meet the higher environmental standards. So another slide, please. So this was the immediate impact of COVID, both in terms of health, but also on the functioning of the corporate sector and its innovative capacity. Now let's look a little bit more in the future and the main challenges which the EU is facing. Next slide. In principle, EU is doing rather well, and we're an important player in creating knowledge or having a high level of skills. With 6% of world population, we produce 18% of global R&D, and actually 21% of high quality, 21% of high quality scientific publications. So this clearly underlines the importance of Europe. On the other hand, Europe has traditionally not been terribly good in transforming this into leadership in innovation and entrepreneurship. I mean, some people call this the European innovation paradox. So there is clearly something to be done about that. Next slide, please. One element which is related to this relates clearly in financial flows into R&D. So on the left-hand side, you can see the spending on total R&D. And I have also shown there the gap to the 3% GDP target, which I'm sure you all know very well. The gap has somehow stayed constant over time, and then although the spending in nominal terms is increasing, still the gap stays at some 110 billion euros, which is quite substantial. Now, in comparison with our main competitors, Europe is not doing terribly well either. So on the right-hand side, you can see private R&D spending, and there with 1.5% of GDP, we stay far behind, for example, Korea, Japan, US, but also compared to China, which has been increasing very fast and then currently spending 1.7% of GDP on private R&D. So what to do with this? How to proceed in the future? And next slide, please. I mean, clearly Europe cannot be best in everything. So one possible way is to focus on and exploit the main opportunities which are out there. So here on this slide, you can see the very important potential of R&I for green transition in Europe. I mean, with the key ambitions to become climate neutral continent by 2050, Europe has the main political aspiration. And if one looks at the top cited scientific publications, also patent applications which relate either to climate or bioeconomy, there we can clearly see that we are very important player there, and actually can build on this for the future. Next slide, please. Similarly, another sector where Europe is in a good starting position, though the competitors are strong, is health. I mean, there we can see in terms of scientific publications, Europe is doing very well. In terms of scientific excellence or patent applications, US is clearly ahead of us. though at the same time, Europe, according to different studies, has some comparative advantage in health R&I efforts. So this could be another element to build on. And next slide. But more broadly, I've already referred to the digital sector, uptake of digital technologies, which has played an extremely important role to dampen the shock from the COVID-19 crisis. But this story is a bit broader. I mean, you are surely aware of the long-run trend when productivity in, well, not only in Europe, but in most advanced countries has been declining. And a lot of hope is precisely placed on digital technologies, which as general purpose technologies can provide an important boost to the performance of companies. This was not happening on a very large scale before the crisis, so hence the declining trend in productivity. There has been a lot of discussions about why this might be the case. One of them was related to the diffusion of these technologies. I mean, there were many of them were appearing, but not necessarily used at a large scale, basically changing the operation of all sectors. Now we have seen a huge impulse in the direction throughout the crisis. So on the left-hand side graph, you can see that actually a majority of firms in the initial stages of COVID have actually adopted productivity enhancing technologies, practices, or introduced new products. So the innovation got a boost through the crisis. On the other hand, and that you can see on the right-hand side, the diffusion of ICT tools and activities in companies varies very widely across countries. I think this is still a pre-COVID picture, but although now probably all these bars have shifted upwards, in some cases very significantly, still such a dispersion is there, and then also affects different companies differently. I mean, in the European Commission DESI survey from 2020, we see that big enterprises are becoming more and more digitalized, and around between 30 and 40 of them, 30 or 40% of them, they've already used, for example, advanced cloud services or big data analytics. Whereas if one looks at SMEs, these shares are much lower, somewhere between 12 and 17%. So this is also an important aspect, which leads me to my next slide, in which I would like to show you the widening productivity gap, which applies both to manufacturing and the non-financial market services. So this has been trend. This trend has been basically captured and analyzed in years before the COVID started, and basically points to the fact that there is increasing gap between the top performing firms, those which are at the technological border, and those behind. And this gap has been increasing very significantly. You can see that it applies to both manufacturing sectors, but also to market services, although services may be affected to even a larger extent. Part of this has been related to the degree of competition in any markets, but a very important part has been also ascribed to the digitalization of the economy and the specific nature which digital technologies have, and which favor this winner takes all dynamics. Obviously, on the one hand, it's good to have these very dynamic businesses. On the other hand, the fact that the benefits do not spill over more widely in the population of firms, it's a reason for concern. Because this has also much broader implications than just the performance of firms. Obviously, this also spills over into wages. There we can see increasing wage dispersion across firms, and thus has direct implications for the well-being of workers and population at large. Which, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is also one of the key socio-political problems facing Europe. If I can ask for another slide. Moreover, on top of this dispersion and then divergence in innovation performance across firms, we can see very clear divide in terms of innovation performance of countries and regions in Europe. So this map shows you innovation performance based on the European Regional Innovation Scoreboard, which came out earlier this year. And when you look at the colors, you can very clearly see that there is some sort of a north-south or east-west divide in terms of innovation performance. I mean, the best performing regions are concentrated in northern and western Europe, and while there are some pockets of excellence in the other parts of the Europe, they are still relatively few, mostly concentrated around capitals of these countries. So this regional divide obviously is creating also very important problems and can have long-lasting implications. So now let me turn to the last part of my presentation, which relates to policies. So next slide, please, and the next one. So here I will argue that R&I can be and is a very important driver and enabler of EU policy priorities. So here I'll be focusing on elements which relate to accelerating the twin green and digital transitions, the importance of strengthening resilience and then preparing for next crisis, and also supporting Europe's competitive edge. I mean, I will now go through several instruments that we already have and that can act on the different aspects of these three policy priorities. Let me start with the most immediate, and that's my next slide, with the immediate response to the COVID-19. There have been many actions which have been taken, but most significant one was the relatively recent launch of the so-called RRF, the Recovery and Reform Facility, which provides some 672.5 billion of euros that are split in more or less in half in terms of grants and loans. So these are funds that are meant to help countries to recover as quickly and then strongly from the COVID impact as possible. However, there is a lot of effort put in order to spend this money wisely. And that's why member states were expected to come with their recovery plans, which outline a number of investments, but also couple them with reforms in order to kickstart the economies in the post-COVID period and then prepare them for the post-COVID period. So this is not just a kind of short-run anti-COVID program, but really long-run investment and reform plan in order to drive the policy objectives that we have, in particular green and digital transitions. So this is also the reason why in the negotiations on this instrument, it has been agreed that at least 37% of all these funds will be devoted to the green goals, whereas at least 20% would go in the digital priorities. So there is a clear directionality in this program. Now, member states have, most of them have actually submitted their plans by now. I think it's 25 who have done that. And the Commission has already provided positive assessment on 22 of these RRPs, and then 19 of them have been approved by Council already. So already money is flowing in these economies on the basis of the reform and investment plans that have been made. Prepayments of some 13% have been made, and then further installments will continue depending on how different milestones and targets, which are specified in these plans, how they are met. What may interest you is that R&I policies play a very important role in these plans. And we did a little accounting exercise, and our estimate is that out of this 670 billion, at least 35 billion are related in one way or another to R&I priorities. Either there are specific sections in these plans which focus on R&I, or they are implicitly embedded in other priorities. And so eventually, in terms of different member states, I know the share of R&I related allocations varies somewhere typically between 5 and 15%, with countries like France and Italy going up to 22 and then 16% respectively. So you can, as you can see, these plans have quite important potential to become important shapers of the R&I landscape in different countries. Next slide, please. Zooming more specifically on R&I policies. I've already mentioned the word directionality. So effectively, and you know that very well, R&I policies are increasingly targeting the policy objectives that we have, namely sustainability, green transitions, also digital transitions. So that's why we put a lot of emphasis on the concept of transformative R&I policy, which brings together these high-level objectives with concrete steps, tools, measures, if you will, which would help us go in that direction. I mean, the directionality then is translated in the practical design of Horizon Europe program and its missions and partnerships, and I'll say something about this in a second. But also in the European National R&D investment targets, I've referred to that already earlier, and the RRF funding targets that I have also mentioned already. Now, what is obviously very crucial in order to be able to go in the direction is to ensure policy coherence. And that's why it is very important that R&I takes this whole of government approach, where different strands, tools, measures are well aligned across sectors, but also across levels, EU, national, regional, and so on and so forth. Now, in designing such transformative R&I policies, it is very important to include stakeholders. And this is also something which permits many of our efforts at the EU level, including Horizon Europe, the design of missions, and so on and so forth, to be sure that views of stakeholders and citizens at large are reflected in this process, which clearly is highly correlated then with the potential impact of these policies. Last but not least, how to do this in practice. It is very important to put more emphasis on to make the innovation policy more innovative, right? In the sense putting more emphasis on experimentation and anticipation. And as far as I understand, you will have a session following after this, which will be precisely looking on this. Next slide, please. So now a couple of words about Horizon Europe, which is our major tool to support RNI efforts. It has just been launched. It is an envelope of some 95.5 billion euros, which is so far the biggest program to support RNI in Europe. I've already mentioned there is a very strong directionality component through the introduction of missions and partnerships. On the missions, these were launched more or less 2 months ago, and the idea is to direct RNI efforts, but not only RNI efforts, to have a broader kind of directionality of efforts to address some key societal challenges that are facing us. So there are 5 such big missions which are targeting, or which have at aim to reaching for more climate neutrality and generating smart cities, restoring our oceans and waters, adaptation to climate change, fighting cancer, and also establishing a soil deal for Europe. So as you can see, these are objectives which are very much related to health or environmentally related challenges that we're facing. And these missions, set clear quantitative targets, typically by 2030, to achieve important progress, and put together means in terms of financing, but also participation of broad set of actors, and being very well rooted in discussions or consultations with public. So this is a very important element which is reshaping the approach to RNI. But this is very much complemented also by bottom-up, by support of bottom-up innovative efforts. And so one of the very important new elements of Horizon Europe has been the establishment of the European Innovation Council, which is focusing on supporting disruptive innovations, as I mentioned, in the bottom-up manner, which cover the full life cycle of innovations, from the conceptions, technological development, into concepts of proof, to final marketing and scale up of such innovations. Now to let me finish on this again. Directionality is reflected by the 35% target for climate action to be as a whole embedded in Horizon Europe, and I've mentioned the EIC. Now let me turn to my last slide and the promised lesson from crisis zoology. I think all of you must have heard about black swans, which are the crises that no one expects, but which with very low probability, but very huge impacts. Now there have been some discussions on whether COVID-19 has been a black swan or not. The author of this metaphor, Nassim Taleb himself, he clearly concluded that COVID-19 was not a black swan. It is rather a gray rhino, my second picture, which is a metaphor for a crisis that we should have expected, or we knew this was coming, but somehow chose to ignore it. So by using these two metaphors, I want to drive the message that in order to become more resilient and then be prepared for future crises, that requires different sets of actions. I mean, we don't want to meet any of the two animals, right? Facing a kind of charging rhino is not a very pleasant prospect. Well, having a black swan is not ideal as well. Though okay, in nature might be nice to encounter to see this animal. What it represents in this terminology is nothing too long for. You know, how to prepare for black swans. I mean, this is something which you know, Donald Rumsfeld would probably call unknown. So effectively, not very easy or even impossible to identify such a thing coming. So there you need to boost the resilience of the system as such, to have enough flexibility, enough degrees of freedom to be able to react if such an event comes. With grain rhinos, we can do much more, because, as I said, their definition is that we know that the grain rhinos are there. It's just that we somehow don't mobilize ourselves for action. So one element is to try to spot as clearly as possible as many of these rhinos as possible. That relates to, for example, foresight activities, trying to scan the horizon and identify the threat, trying to understand them better, so frame more accurately what we know, and put more emphasis on long run risk assessment, and then also translating this into the flexibility and response capacity of the system. Though in this case we can already you know, do concrete steps to be ready for such threats. Like now in COVID, for the next events of this sort, we will be much better prepared. So with this, let me stop here, and I'll be happy to engage in conversation on these topics.
Alex, thank you very much for the presentation. I really admire how you managed to fit all the pieces of information within just half an hour, all different topics and programs and the options and opportunities. And I have already several questions in regards to your presentation. But before that, I would like to invite all our participants to ask questions. Please write them into the chat, and my colleagues will bring them to me. I already have one, which I will ask later on, and it is focused on time which takes to get all the approvals needed. So if I may start with some of my questions for just clarifications. I really like one of your summary slides which compared the US, EU and China in terms of publications. And I'd like to ask my colleagues to bring the slide up if I can. Because the way I read the slide was that when it comes to the research, the scientific publications, the EU is doing fairly well. But when it comes to the quality of the research, it is not that well. But what's the worst is when it comes to the application of research, where in comparison, for example, to US, we are really lagging behind. So I have several questions. First one, do I read this slide correctly? And secondly, why do you think this is the case? Why we are able to actually publish a lot, but then what are the reasons why we fail actually to apply the research into the practice? What do you think is the biggest problems, and how can all the innovation agencies be of assistance, and how can we help?
Okay, now starting on the easier part of your question, I think yes, you read this correctly. Europe is doing pretty well in terms of production of knowledge, scientific publications in this case, and I think this is broadly recognized. Now, going to the difficult part of your question, the $1 million question, why this is so, there have been a lot of discussions about this. I mean, at the kind of higher level, and I've mentioned it in my presentation, we, for a number of reasons, are not good in translating this into practical outcomes. Right. So this transition between researching, coming up with good, interesting ideas, and translating into something practical, it's a big issue. Now, why this is so? There may be a number of reasons. One could be financing. We have much less startups or scale-ups or unicorns in Europe than in the US. So there it is much easier for these companies to come with ideas or liaise with the universities, researchers, and translate these ideas into something which is marketable. At this higher end, when one looks at unicorns, I mean, in Europe, for one European unicorn, there are 7 in the US and 3 in China. So that's already very clear manifestation of this trend. This is to a large extent related to financing. In Europe, we have more limited sources of external financing, which these high growth firms usually need and rely on. Again, venture capital in Europe, I think over the last decade, we have had or generated 12 times less venture capital than US did. But this also relates to other sources of financing. In Europe, we are much more relying on bank sourced financing in general, less on market sources, and this is also one element of it. So all the proposals and initiatives are under the European Capital Market Union are hopefully going in this direction and could help. But there is most likely much more. I referred also to the gap between different regions. So there is this huge innovation gap between different countries and regions, which obviously points to the fact that the huge potential, the overall potential of the single market, including in terms of innovative activities, is not necessarily fully used. There could clearly be different approaches to regulation. I mean, again, US and Europe varies quite a bit in terms of how we approach regulatory approaches. From different studies, you can also see that there is a higher risk aversion in Europe than in the US. So all these factors can basically come together and contribute to this innovation paradox. But given the fact that there is a huge amount of literature trying to go into this, and there is not a very clear agreement on which is the one driving factor, this still remains this $1 million question. My personal guess is that financing is a very important element there.
Perfect, thank you very much. Well, but if you look into what happened in the EU over the past 2 years, actually since pandemic started, even the countries which are regarded by the Innovation Union Scoreboard, by the ranking as moderate or emerging innovators, they managed to develop their own PCR kits. Some developed their own ventilators. Actually, they managed to, within just a couple of months, put into practice an idea or a product or a service or solution, telemedicine, telehealth solutions, etc. One of the reasons why plenty of organizations think this actually happened was that the EU got rid of, let's say, excessive bureaucracy and shortened all the processes which you actually mentioned at the beginning. And I looked into it, and it was nicely put together as the ERA versus Corona action plan, which comprised 10 concrete points, which really streamlined all the processes. Well, my question is, do you think that, let's say these streamlined processes, the idea of getting rid of all unnecessary administration will continue even in the future? Because from some perspective, it actually was one of the key reasons why even the countries which for so long struggled to deliver products into the market succeeded during pandemics.
I'm not a health expert, so I cannot refer to the specific experiences of some of the health sectors, production of these tests and so on and so forth. But more broadly, I think we should certainly learn from the crisis, and if there are ways how to do things better, more expediently, we should certainly do that. I mean, at the same time, there are some rules are there for a reason, and that's why this remains to be assessed on case by case in a case by case approach. I mean, Europe was criticized at the beginning of moving rather slowly in terms of approving the vaccines and so on and so forth. But I think eventually, if, this approach has proven to be justified. I mean, in some cases, you just don't want to take such shortcuts. On the other hand, and that would be my point, where we can learn from the crisis, where things were speeded up, and we managed to cut unnecessary red tape. I think this should certainly be pursued. But as I said, that would probably not be done on a kind of blank in a blanket approach, but would have to be assessed kind of carefully.
Thank you. And we have actually a question in relation to my first question about the differences between the US and the EU. It is a question from Harald Hochreiter, and his question is that following up on differences in scientific results and commercialization between EU, US and China, is there an analysis showing a comparison between these three on how they perform on green technologies or climate-oriented topics?
I will not be able to give you a direct reference at this point, but clearly there is research into this, also part of the overall examination of the relative positions of these three countries or blocks, if you will. So clearly, and that was something which I was trying to show in my presentation, Europe actually does have some comparative advantage in terms of climate technologies. So we clearly should build on that, and I think it's not would not necessarily be wise to kind of fight on every single technology, since if you need to concentrate or direct your resources in certain directions, then one needs to be selective in one way or another. So for me, for example, the climate related technologies would be one element on which to bet.
Okay, thank you. And I will use this opportunity to ask another question, because it also is related to the topics that we've already covered, and this one is a bit longer, so I will read it out. EU is implementing several flagship initiatives and programs such as Horizon Europe and others. To handle the market failures, IPCEI projects are currently a part of daily operations in our agencies. But as you very well know, the time to market is crucial in case of breakthrough or disruptive innovations, but the process of IPCEI is rather slow. Since February of this year, we are only at the beginning of pre-notification processes, H2. It takes several more weeks, and after that, member states will have to arrange financing. That will take another month. I'm afraid that innovations will not be any more innovative in time of final approval. Is there any chance to make these processes faster? What is the impact you expect from IPCEI in general? And do you think that 1.5 years of approval is reasonable time? So several questions.
several questions, and I think parts of this question are I'm not necessarily the right person to answer them. I can give my view as a chief economist. Dealing with issues related to R&I, not necessarily as a practitioner who is running these processes. I think we all know innovation, in particular disruptive innovations, are a very dynamic process, and things can move very quickly. So that's very clear. For that, I mean, obviously we have tools like the European Innovation Council, which I mentioned, and which started in its pilot phase, and then very quickly was successful in promoting a number of companies and specific technologies and innovations. I think in the first 2 years of its existence, it has supported I think over hundreds of companies, with number of them actually growing very importantly and reaching market with new technologies or innovations. So I think there are tools which actually are capable of delivering these impacts reasonably fast. Now, referring to these bigger endeavors like IPCIs, I mean, clearly it takes quite some time to put everything together. I mean, I do not want to speculate on how much faster one could, in principle, do it, but there is clearly a number of requirements to bring all these actors together and then somehow make sure that these projects go in the right direction. I mean, there are obviously the broader issues of competition in the market and objectives and so on and so forth. So clearly this slows these processes down.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you very much. We've already touched a bit a topic of COVID and how it impacted all the processes and the landscape. Well, my question now is, well, which of the processes and the changes and the initiatives, the projects that happened since the beginning of the pandemics, do you think, or do you regard as the best practices, and you personally would like to be either kept or repeated in the future? If there is a particular either legislation or project or a call which you liked, please share it with us.
Yeah, I think first thing which comes to one's mind is vaccination. I mean, clearly this was a major success. How research and development, help us to find a way out of the crisis. I mean, we're still not out of the woods, but without vaccination, we would be in a completely different situation. And clearly, this the development of vaccines, this does not. This didn't start just with the start of COVID. One can give an example of the BioNTech company, which produced, I think, the most successful vaccine so far, together with Pfizer. And this company was created, I think, sometimes in 2008 as a kind of spin-off, or they've from the University of Mainz, if I'm not mistaken. And over its existence has drawn on support from a number of projects under I think FP7 and probably also Horizon 2020. So there was this long run support to which clearly led to the development of the new mRNA technology that after the outburst of COVID crisis was finalized or used to develop a well-functioning COVID vaccine. So to me, this is a clearly success story where one can see quite important support from the EU side. Other success stories, and this is, I think, where EU plays an important role, and where we are quite good is in terms of bringing actors together and trying to encourage sharing of information, because this was also crucial in from the very beginning of the crisis, to share information between different actors. Right, between researchers, but also public authorities, health authorities, and then there we have initiated the COVID-19 portal for exchange of information, like the virus sequences, which has proven to be very useful and highly used by researchers from all around the world. So essentially, I think this was another success story to make sure that information flows openly and freely, which contributes to the progress and allows researchers around the globe to look into these issues and in a faster way to produce potential vaccines, cures, or other means of fighting the virus. So I think these are kind of main projects or directions which I would consider as best practices.
Yes, and I believe that we all for sure agree on that. Well, you started the presentation with a nice slide which showed some short-term priorities because of pandemics, and then long-term, which is focused on aging, which is focused on climate change. Well, my question is, well, we've seen over a couple of past months how tiny virus can actually completely change the way how we live our lives, which also impacts well, GDP of countries and virtually everything we do. My question is, do you think that, how often do you expect these long-term priorities as they are defined today to change? Because some argue that COVID showed that healthcare should be of greater priority because it is directly linked to the GDP, because there was an old study, I think, done in early 2000s by IMF, which claimed that one extra year of life expectancy is equal to 3 to 4% in increase in GDP. And if you look into most countries, 2020, they decreased the life expectancy roughly by 0.5 to 2 years, and it is more or less related to a decrease in GDPs. So my question is, if you think that healthcare should be of greater priority, or is it something that is already sufficiently covered within either Horizon 2020 or other projects?
I think healthcare should definitely continue to be a priority, and that relates to my last slide with the swan and the rhino. Since pandemics was this gray rhino, many people had actually talked about already before, but these warnings were largely ignored. So this is clear that you know, this will continue to be an issue. I know that there are some studies which may be estimating probability of pandemics, and you know, by simply you know, statistically, if the probability of a pandemic in a given year is 1%, you know, if you accumulate this over a number of years, this if not certainly, this becomes a highly probable event. Now we have had one of the biggest pandemics ever. Now, you know, this does not reduce its likelihood to be repeated in the future, maybe even, hopefully not, in a worse form. So I think definitely we need to be prepared, and on that side, also you may know recently a new agency, the so-called HERA, the Health Emergency Preparedness Agency, has been launched, which should be precisely looking into these issues. Now, in a broader way, but health is clearly not the only priority that we should be looking into. I mean, what COVID has also you know, caused was this huge fallout in schooling. So now we have had big impacts on cohorts of students, which may translate into their prospects, professional lives, their lifetime incomes, and so on and so forth. So essentially, this is a very important and fundamental impact too. I mean, there have been papers which have been trying to make estimates of how this could decrease the overall GDP or well-being, if you will, in the world. Right now, related to this, and then also the uptake of digital technologies, and moving more in this digital era. Again, there is a huge body of evidence which is looking into what type of skills will be needed in the future, because most likely, again, bordering with certainty, there will be a lot of current jobs and tasks which workers are doing will become obsolete, and you know, we will need new skills in order to be successful in this more digital economy. So again, this speaks you know, in favor of putting also education and you know, upskilling, training systems as one of the priorities. Now, going even further, we have spoken about climate change already. You know, the impacts of climate change are becoming more and more tangible. This is absolutely undeniable, and then also the probability of climate-related events is increasing. So this is another aspect which one needs to consider. So there is overall a number of priorities. How to prioritize between these priorities? It's of course a difficult question, which relates to public choice and also political decisions eventually.
Yes. Thank you very much. And we have another question which is focused on a topic of centralization, decentralizations, and priorities. It is by Sabine Meyer. The question is, what role do you see for national innovation agencies regarding transformative innovation policy? Is the current focus of many agencies on R&D and innovation funding sufficient? And then, if needed, to establish the different roles, interventions, such as to invest in changing trajectories to support transformation, what would that be? So once again, several questions for you.
And again, not easy ones. I think I was describing the tools which are somehow championed and at the EU level. But clearly, innovation process is very much kind of place-based, rooted to local conditions, right? So although it's very important to put in place the right framework conditions, that's where different governments, administrations, but also EU can play an important role. Also, the access to finance has a rather kind of overarching role. Encouraging innovation has a very important this place-based dimension, and I think this is precisely where the role of national innovation agencies is, in order to intermediate this and support these processes, because clearly, if us sitting in Brussels, we certainly do not have such a good overview of what's going on in different countries or regions. I think these innovation ecosystems are very particular, and the components are connected in a different way. So there are no one-fit-all solutions. So I think this really speaks in favor of an important role for national-based institutions who know the ground how to do that. And I think they have been doing this in a very successful way. I mean, obviously there is always possibilities to go further and improve. I think from the point of view from the overarching or EU point of view, I think what is useful and important is to share experiences, because despite this specificity, there may be solutions which work in one place and could potentially work also in other. So I think an important element, and this is also the role which Taftie obviously is playing, to bring the players together and exchange and discuss and then see whether there are some practices that could be transferred from one country or region to another. So that would be my take on this.
Yes, agreed. And this is actually, I think, one of the reasons why even the countries which are not as good at innovations managed to develop their own solutions during the pandemics, because the information was shared at such pace and in such a way that, well, it has never been that before. Well, but you mentioned a very nice point, and it is that there is no solution that would fit every single country, and that is the reason why innovation agencies in different countries need to have their own independency and funds and resources and opportunities to act. My question is then, from your perspective, how then do you make sure that the value is maximized from the resources, either from allocative or technical efficiency? Well, how can you control if the resources are spent in the way that, from the perspective of Commission, from the perspective of the body that is responsible for maximizing the use of resources, is actually the best value achieved? Do you have any models for that, or is it that you hope that the countries will always try to achieve the best interest for themselves, or is there any way how you interfere if you do not think that the value is actually being, well, delivered and maximized?
And obviously we are, at least as regards the EU finance programs, we are trying to make sure that the spending is as efficient as possible. So clearly there are mechanisms which already start with the selection of projects. I mean, which is done is in an independent way, trying to make sure that the best proposals effectively are selected, those with the highest potential impact. But you ex ante, you never know. I mean, innovation almost by definition is very uncertain, and in some cases, a very promising project may turn into nothing. In other cases, you may achieve.
It seems that we lost Mr. Hobza for a moment. Yes. So, sorry for the technical issues. We are still waiting for Mr. Hobza to finish his answer.
Hello, can you hear me? Is it?
Yes. Oh, we can hear you now. We can't see you, but we can hear you now.
Yeah. Sorry, I had a technical glitch. I hope it's solved now.
Yes, we can hear you. We can't see you, but we can hear you. We can hear you. Yes.
Okay. I think my camera may come back at some point. Then please tell me when you see me as well. Again. Wait, can you remember who you were?
Well, what was the last what we heard before you got? Well, you basically said that R&D projects are risky, and we can't know for sure, and that's
okay. So that's where I stop. So effectively, if you know, the point was that ex ante you do
thing will actually deliver or not, right? Which also links to the issue why financing innovation is so tricky, and why many companies do find it difficult to source markets for funds. Clearly, you know, assessing of how potentially promising a certain idea for technology is very difficult. So, although one does as good job as possible to start with to assess projects, you know, there is no guarantee that all of them will actually deliver all what one may hope for. That's why we also do ex post assessments. So we're trying to do rigorous and constant scanning of our programs, midterm assessments at the end, to see what the overall outcome and impact of these programs was, and we're trying to look for ways how to make sure you know, that whatever lessons come from such assessments are then incorporated in the future editions of these projects.
Yes, understood. Thank you for that for answer. We still can't see you, but at least we can hear you. Nice. Yes, it's yes.
I'm trying to bring my camera.
Yes, now, yes, we can see you now. It's
all right.
Thank you for that.
There we go.
Right then. Well, your answer actually leads to another question, which is relating to the fact that right, if we can't for sure know what the impact of all the resources, Horizons project or other financial initiatives will be, well, how can then we know that we will actually manage to catch the US when it comes to the applied research, the patents, or actually making sure that the quality will be improved?
Yeah, I think this is not only an issue of EU level funding, clearly, because as I've shown in my slides, where the EU is falling behind is in particular private investments in R&I or R&D. So in that sense, what we need to try is to boost in particular conditions for private investments as such. So I don't think one can plan this in a too kind of deterministic way, because this is a purely stochastic process, and as such, I think it is very important to put in place the right conditions. Right. I mean, you've asked at the beginning, and then really trying to can identify issues which apply, across the board or which are specific to different sectors. Put in place, support which companies may need in terms of, different accelerators, provide expertise, resources, well, not only financial but also in terms of know-how, and trying to push in this direction. I mean, obviously, when we are planning or programming Horizon Europe strategic plans, work plans, I mean, we set some objectives which we would ideally like to achieve, which is related to the directionality of investments that I've referred to. So there are some desirable objectives, and then different calls for projects are published, in the way that if projects that are selected deliver on the expected outcomes, that this would move us to the desired outcomes. So in terms of planning, one does as much as one can, but given the uncertainty in this process, I mean, clearly this does not guarantee that we will get in all aspects as far as one wants to get. I mean, if we're lucky, maybe we exceed expectations. So this is game which can go in both directions. But what I really want to underline is this comparison with the US and performance of US, but also other our main competitors. It really points to the performance of companies and the private sector, which is very crucial and where there is the main difference.
Right. Yes, completely agree. Although I have just realized that the statistics you showed, it was from 2020, right? So it means that it probably included also the UK still in the numbers, right?
Depends which numbers you have in mind. The ones on R&D spending, I'm afraid that they're even older than 2020. I would have to double check that, right? But it may slightly alter the picture, but okay. UK has a large share in the European GDP, but okay, it would not really change the direction of the message.
Right. Yes. Of course, that's true. And I have one last question, which was regarding the slide where you show that the gap in terms of innovations and productivity, in terms of and a comparison between IT sectors and manufacturing and others is actually widening. One of the first slides you showed. The question is actually, what can we do about that particular? Because it seems that, well, it is not only widening, but in terms of the way education is structured, in terms of the way how some of the financial interests are focused on, well, it doesn't seem that the gap is going to be closed. In fact, it seems it's going to be, getting bigger and bigger every year. So, well, do you think that there is a solution to that, or do you think that it is something that doesn't have to concern us, and we should focus only on the bits and pieces that we can be best in terms of the world expertise and outcomes?
Okay, now you refer to the gap between firms or between
industries? Between
industries. Okay, there are two elements there. I think there has been this long run trend where the differences were increasing, not only between different industries, but also between firms within given industries, which is already, I think, quite an important source of concern, because obviously, as I said, you do not want a group of companies that the top performers systematically outperform the rest and get basically away. Right, so this is one element which we need to pay attention to, and a lot of analytical efforts have been invested into understanding what's going on. I've mentioned in some cases this might be an issue of competition. For example, in the US, this has been ascribed to some extent to maybe a bit more lax implementation of competition law over past years. In Europe to a lesser extent. right? Another very important element, and you may see this all around the press, the issues of Facebook's, which is now called Meta, if I understand correctly, but also other digital companies. You know, these new digital technologies have this economic attribute of having basically marginal costs equal to zero, and once you basically become a leader, then this perpetuates your position, and you can kind of benefit from that. So the kind of the winner takes all, or winner takes most dynamics. And then we have seen this quite clearly, which somehow can be coupled with these anti-competitive practices, like buying up your potential competitors before they manage to grow enough to challenge you. So all these issues are very important and need to be tackled. I mean, part of this is on the regulatory front. So there are discussions both in the US but also in Europe on how to adjust competition policies in order to make sure that these negative effects are minimized. There are also issues related to fairness, digital taxation, and so on and so forth. So this is obviously one part which is out there. Much of this is related to data. Who owns the data, who uses the data. So another element is to somehow make sure that the data is available at as large scale as possible, and can be used by also the upcoming firms, so that this would eliminate to some extent this competitive advantage of the big firms which are collecting big chunks of data. And much has been also done on this side by the EU with the GDPR directive and so forth. So essentially there is this issue of divergence between best performers and laggards. So on regulation on one side, but also, and then that links to the innovative efforts, is to make sure that the benefits of the innovation, new technologies also trickle down and are used to a larger extent by other companies. And now COVID might have provided a boost to this, and as we have seen, we'll see how things will continue, whether this was just kind of level shift, or whether this manages to kickstart some more dynamics among firms and bring us at a higher level of growth. So that's basically situation in general. Clearly, this manifests itself differently across sectors. Though this divergence between best performers and worst, I think, is this general phenomenon which applies to many, if not most sectors. Now, within the sectoral aspect is also tricky in the sense that there is the different sectoral composition of economies in Europe compared to US, China, and others. And then this is also the reason why, since we rely more on automobiles and aeronautics, defense, the outcome in terms of R&D spending by firms from the latest vintage of our industry survey does not speak very much in favor of Europe, but this is this compositional effect which we will see how it will turn out in the future.
Yes, great. Thank you very much for that answer. And I would like to ask our participants if they have any last-minute questions. And in the meantime, they think of some. I would like just some summary points. So COVID didn't have any positives. Well, one of the few is that it showed us that if the processes are streamlined, information is shared, and all the support is given, even small countries, European countries, can deliver research ideas and change them into the products within just a couple of months. So all the processes can be streamlined, and we can get we can put more ideas into the market, which is well amazing news, and we actually showed it. So that's first positive point. The second positive point is that well, thanks to COVID, or due to COVID, that's probably a better word, we will have a massive amount of financing at our disposal, and it will be up to individual countries to decide based on their, well, the resilient plans and other projects, which is also amazing because that's something, as you mentioned, is one of the key obstacles and the key things that we need in order to catch the US or some other highly innovative countries. Well, that means that we should be able to deliver results. We should be able to catch the US, Singapore, Japan, and other countries, which was mentioned in your presentation. And hopefully, all these improved processes, reduced bureaucracy, and the data sharing will be kept even in coming years. Because if this is all true and all will be kept, I'm confident that finally we will be able to change the problems with the quality, and especially when it comes to application of the research ideas. Is that also correct, or is that also right from your position, or is it just me being too optimistic?
By nature, I am also optimistic, but I think it is nice to see the glass half full rather than half empty. And I think I can subscribe to the points which you made individually. Now, obviously, when we look at the situation overall, the challenges which we are facing are huge, right? So as big as the spending through RRF, for example, may seem, clearly much more effort, both financial but also in a broader sense, will be needed to tackle these challenges. With COVID, you mentioned very few positives, but very important one in terms of this kick towards more innovation, digitalization, and then so forth. Still, the jury is out there to see how significant improvement in our performance this will bring. I mean, there are these big discussions between productivity optimists and pessimists on what is the potential of the new technologies, AI, and so on and so forth. So again, being on the optimistic side, I hope there will be some hopefully tangible positive impact coming out of there, but not certain, and certainly needs to be very much actively promoted through ensuring greater diffusion and take up of these technologies. But also there are these other huge challenges, most importantly climate change, with increasing impact and costs that we will face. So again, many efforts will be needed, and very important role for research and innovation in this direction. So let's stay optimistic, and then let's hope this will also help us to face these huge challenges, which are hopefully not insurmountable, but very huge.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And since we do not have any other questions, I would like to give you once again my thanks for your amazing presentation and the answers. I would like to wish you all the best in your projects, and that my and your optimistic view will actually happen in coming years. So thank you once again, and hope to see you soon.
Okay. Martin, thank you also very much, and also to the organizers of this event. It was a real pleasure to be here and discuss with you. So I wish you a very pleasant rest of the event and on this interesting topic of policy experimentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.